want to tell a longer story on the web, you could show the users a wall of text, but that's not gonna be very user-friendly. People are afraid of walls of text. That's because our brain doesn't really like to process a lot of information. So instead, you can break down a wall of text like that into a story that assembles itself as you scroll. And this is exactly what we're gonna do today. The story is gonna be about how to handle client communication, especially when it happens at 3 p.m. on a Friday and they need a project for Monday morning. So first, let's start to plan something like this. The framing would be getting a message at 3 p.m. on a Friday about a project that's due for Monday and whether you should take it or not. When you want people to be engaged in the story, you need to remove friction. So you need to show them elements or components that they're kind of used to when it comes to communication. And in this case, it's chat bubbles. We talk through chat bubbles a lot nowadays, and it's actually the most preferred communication type for most people. Yeah, people don't really like calls anymore. But having a very long chat bubble conversation with left, right, just kind of talking to each other would also be a little bit like a wall of text. So instead, let's plan it around a decision tree. A decision tree that can expand in any direction, but we're gonna show just one of them and just a small segment of it just to show you how easy it is to animate things like that in Webflow. As always, I'm gonna start on paper. I'm gonna sketch out a little mind map first to show where I'm going with this. What kind of information and decision types will there be and how can they be connected to one another? To make this work, we need at least a couple of those different decision types and different screen types. Otherwise, it would be boring. Okay, now let's plan a little bit of the actual experience with the copy, but still on paper. And I'm gonna highlight with colorful markers a little bit of that flow so that I can kind of feel a little bit better for where it's at. That gives me a better way to imagine how I would later make it in the design tool and then translate it into the no-code software using Webflow. Once you have your paper sketch done, it's time to move it into a design tool and plan it in a little bit of higher fidelity. So that's exactly what I did. I put it into my design tool of choice and I rearranged some things, realizing that in high fidelity visuals, they probably should look a little bit different to match the overall aesthetic. But that's good. At this stage, you can make any tweaks you want and be sure that the whole experience is consistent and coherent. Once we got that high fidelity design, let's start assembling it. I'm gonna start a new Webflow project and just make containers one under the other, because the whole idea of a scrollable website like this, where roughly in the middle of the screen you see a new element assemble itself and then you go to the next one, requires you to have a couple containers one under the other and then basically animating the on-scroll effect on those containers. I'm gonna go with just 4 containers for the sake of this presentation, but obviously the full story should have more and more of different kinds. The important part is that every container should be a different kind of visual. So basically once you go from one to the next, you feel like something is changed and your brain gets stimulated and it gets more interested in what's to come. We will, of course, need chat bubbles. That's obvious. But we might also need a little bit more to it. And on the design phase, I realized that I can easily generate a person, in this case the client, and then generate this exact same person on a transparent background in different emotional states. So depending on what your choice is in the response, they can be happy, angry, indifferent, or sad. Okay, now let's start assembling it. And the first thing that I want to do before the messages and the paths and the diagrams, I want to create a header that grabs your attention with a unique setting. So this unique setting, as from our design, is gonna be me designing in outer space. For that, I'm just gonna make a background of outer space that fades into a blue gradient that fades back into the black background of the whole website. And on top of that, I'm gonna put an AI generated image on me in a spacesuit with a laptop. But something's missing, so I'll also generate some sprites and create a GIF that will be my jetpack propeller. And then in this case, we need everything to assemble itself a little bit before we start scrolling, because this is the entry point. And just to show you how different these animations can be, I'm gonna use a different sliding transition for every little bit of the text in the header. Then we specify how it disappears as you start scrolling and how the next section assembles itself. The next section is gonna be the first message from the client. And obviously, since you're getting a message, it's also good to show that little notification bubble appear on the message icon. So I'm gonna animate it all using the timeline and then plan it in a way where each animation begins at the right time, so they're all visible, and at the same time it looks good and comes back together as a consistent piece. Okay, that's looking really good. Now, creating a whole conversation like that is all about adding more containers to the bottom, adding elements within those containers, using margins and paddings to position them the right way, and then basically picking the starting and ending point of the animation. What's cool is also you can add an extra animation or more into a single timeline. So you can just basically pick many different properties and animate those properties one by one or all at the same time. That can help you create those animations in a much more interesting way. And the other thing that I did here is I added a couple of animated GIFs that animate all the time. So that way there is some point of focus for your eye and for your brain on the website, even when nothing is moving. I don't want to have it in every section, so I have it in every other section, but that way it's still engaging even if you're not scrolling. This is a very cool experiment that shows that you can have engaging storytelling on the web done in a pretty simple way. Just a bunch of drag and dropping and setting the properties, and the only thing you're limited by here is your imagination. Check out Webflow and their new GSAP animations using the link in the description of this video. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, make sure to subscribe, and obviously have a beautiful day.